Meeting is in order. Thanks for coming, everybody. I think we'll have a pretty quick meeting, is my hope. We had some changes at the last minute on the agenda, so there is a revised agenda. I also wanted to just mention a couple things that you will hear more detail about later. There was a lot of activity going on about the potential sidewalks on Strathmore, on the south side of Strathmore from the boundary edge of our town up to Holy Cross entrance. That's the Holy Cross Academy entrance. And you may recollect that there were petitions that were going on this summer and letters of support from our legislative 18 district officials. And while this was going on, there were stormwater construction along that same south side of Strathmore in front of the Holy Cross Church and School. So that was why this impetus came forward to try to see if the state highway, which is performing the construction work, might also put in the sidewalk along the south side of Strathmore up to Rockville, or Holy Cross Academy entrance, actually. And so the word we got back is that they recognized that, and that they were that the state highway recognized that those potential opportunities for the sidewalk and any other traffic calming and pedestrian safety kind of features. They were open to having a field walk, I think that was their expression, a field walk, with the surrounding communities, including the town residents, whoever, to look at the situation and see if there was something that everybody could come together on to do. So it's not like it's not a done deal. You know, there is still potential. It's just not happening at the moment when we thought the opportunity was ripe for sidewalk construction in addition to the stormwater construction happening. So, you know, we'll look for this fall to see whether they'll schedule a field walk with town residents and the neighboring communities. So that's one. And our very much grateful appreciation to the Legislative 18 district officials who also signed a letter in support of that action and to support our town. Well, can I finish my remarks? And when we get into it, I also wanted to acknowledge that we do have a year-end closing going on the financial books. Andrea may discuss that a little bit more, but one aspect which everybody is always clamoring to know about is what kind of carryover we're looking at from FY19 into this FY20 fiscal year. And we're looking at a little more than $345,000 carryover, just so you know. And I think that's all, but Hans, you wanted to ask?
You mentioned that the sidewalk was to be extended to the entrance to Holy Cross, of which there are 5. Is it the one at the
I said the Holy Cross Academy.
Okay.
There's only one entrance into Holy Cross Academy that I know of.
This is the girls' school.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Okay.
the academy.
Okay. Yeah.
The other one is the Holy Cross School
Okay.
and church.
So at which point it says, why don't you do it all the way to Rockville? I mean, all
Well,
the way to the Pike.
Because
But-
there already is
Because there
one
already is.
Okay.
in front of the
That's right,
Strathmore
yeah.
Symphony
Yeah,
Park.
it's as a consequence of the development, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
There was talk, 2002,
yeah.
about when that wasn't done, to have it all done, but
Yeah.
they put in that partial
Yeah, I was
piece.
involved in that.
Yeah. Figured. Okay. Before we have the approval of the agenda, I actually wanted to ask council if I could put in a new business item about the town council retreat, which, we have had in our minutes in earlier months, that would be September 21st. But if we're all pretty sure that's going to change, I'd like to just acknowledge that in this meeting, because it's supposed to be this month that we're supposed to have the town council retreat. So I'd like to insert that and ask, you know, whether when we get to new business, if you'd like to do it in October or some other date. Since we're not, unless
Sure,
you,
why not?
unless you absolutely know we're going to do it September 21st, but I kind of figured we would not be. Okay, so I want to put that in just as a point of discussion.
So where do you want to insert that, at the town manager's report or before?
I was going to do it at new business. It's the mayor council.
Okay,
Go to the first item?
Okay,
We can do it as a first item. Should hopefully be kind of quick.
okay.
And we went round and round before. I think it was in June when we were settling that, and nobody was available in July, and nobody was available in August. So then September was the month we all decided, okay, we'd have that. Okay, thank you. Are there any other changes to the agenda, or?
I'd like to propose a new business item as a process to select and approve a council person to fill a vacant council member seat, including the process to vacate. So in other words, I'd like for us to come together, figure out what the process would be, how we would handle it, and you know, if there's any formality to resigning, what that might be. Just so everybody's on the
Whether
same
we
page.
get real specific or not, but to just
Right.
at least start entertaining it,
Start
right?
start
Talking
a
about it?
framework for it would be good.
Okay. All right. Is everyone else okay with that?
Sure.
Addition to the change? Okay.
Where do you want it added?
Probably at the end, but I'm fine with wherever the rest of my fellow council members feel fit to put it, if we want to do it
Want to
sooner.
put it at the end?
I was going to put it at the end.
Okay, we'll put it at the end.
We probably should just do a quick note that one change from the draft agenda we had out to this one is we took off that replacement process for the council member that was thinking of resigning it. You know, we're going to postpone, Jane is postponing her resignment until the next month because the whole body of the council wasn't totally set to move forward on it today. And she's not here today either, which we don't have to not do it today because she's not here, but some of us would like to do it that way. So it was decided to just hold that for now. And that's tied to what Kaki was saying about the retreat, so.
Okay, yep, thank you, Stephen. And with those changes, are you accepting the agenda with those changes?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, all improved?
Aye.
Aye.
Unanimous? Okay,
Yep.
unanimous, thank you. And now on to approval of minutes. Now, we have quite a number of them. So I think the first one listed in order will be the last council meeting before the break, which is the July 8th one. Then the second item under approval are the previous minutes, and there's 3 of them from July 28th, 2018, August 1st, 2018, and August 13th, 2018. 2 of those 3 were special meetings, and the August 13th was a regular meeting. So those are from last year, and those will be the second item for approval. So, do we have any changes of the July 8th regular meeting minutes?
Yes, I've got a proposed change. Now, I wasn't there. However, as a brief bit of history, we attempted to do some regulation through setbacks of things like porches and property coverage and so forth, and it got us all wrapped around the axle and ended up with a lawsuit. And I am suggesting that rather than stating what we have there, that on new business, this is going to be on page 2, accessory dwelling units, which is the second thing down. If you go to the last line, almost the last line, it starts off with the county council is likely to pass it, and well, Garrett Park doesn't have a way to disallow through zoning power. We can determine how they are done through setback power. I am suggesting that rather than possibly get us in into some type of hot water, that we just strike, beginning with and, ending all the way through to setback power. And then the last line would say, there is a need for more study. And then just leave it as there is a need for more study, period.
Okay, so would you like to read the sentence that you're proposing it look like?
Okay.
I know where you're going, but I just think for everybody's benefit, just read what you'd
So
like
it
to
will
say.
start with, the county council is likely to pass it, comma, there will be a need for more study, period. Oh, more study how to address this, period.
Not appropriate for Garrett Park.
So,
Right, because
okay.
I don't want,
Can you read that again? The county council?
is likely to pass it,
Okay.
and then we go to, there will be a need for more study
Right.
about, and then just take how to address this, period.
Maybe say this type of development.
Right, or this. How do you get
For
this
Garrett
type?
Park.
Yeah, if you want for Garrett Park, sure.
How council can address this.
For Garrett Park.
Yeah, because it does say, so that's appropriate, we're not really able to judge, or we're judging whether it's, yeah, it's just take that.
My main concern is disallow through zoning power down through setback power because of the hot water we got into. I don't know if that's an issue, so I just assume if we just strike it, then we can debate it later.
Yes, mainly we just need to go through details, I think that covers it. We know it's, they already did pass it, so we kind of know
Yeah.
what's the next step, to figure out how, not what.
And I think, Stephen, you're taking that one on, right? You're leaving
Yeah.
that with the land use committee? maybe?
Yeah, so we need to have a meeting with them, which has been a little bit of a challenge to,
That's just a side note.
yeah,
We may come
Maybe
back to
you're-
that
we need your help in that.
under town updates, okay?
That was all I had for this.
All right. Are there any other changes? Okay, everybody in favor with that change? Aye?
Aye.
Okay, that's unanimous. Okay, now we turn to the 3 minutes, meeting minutes from last year. We'll start with the July 28th one. And are there any changes, or can we go ahead and approve them?
Honestly, I haven't had a chance to review them all in depth, we just got them on Saturday, so I'm wondering, is there any, when you're looking to get it closed out for something with auditing, is there a way we can review it and then get back with comments by email?
I must say,
It might be
I
here.
suffer from the same problem, and that it's been a really crazy the last 5 days for me, and while I had the documentation, I didn't get a chance to study it, and I apologize for that. But I have issues with just diving into it, and since look, they're only about a year and a half old, no, a year and, 15 months old. I think holding on to them might be useful.
Yes, I think Andrew put out an email earlier to let council know that this was coming because of audit reasons, and the auditor is here this week, and it's for the they're doing the internal controls audit as well, and they requested these.
And the reason we didn't approve
So we
them,
usually vote. It's a voting process in a public meeting. So if we don't do them now, we don't do them until next October. And we need to get something in for the fiscal year.
Well, you got my approval.
Okay? There's one. Does anybody want to make a
yeah,
motion?
technically.
But I wasn't
Does
here for the
anybody
meeting.
want, Well, does anyone want to?
Okay, I'll move that we approve the minutes as stated in the handouts we've been given.
And you know, maybe Andrea, you could just, sorry,
No,
I'm
it's
going to
fine.
interrupt that process for a second. If it helps the rest of the council members, I believe, I didn't really look at them, that Andrea took all the edits that were done last year and then, you know, because this came forward last year and you all wanted more edits, and so it was, you know, finally it was taken off the table because it got later and later in the year. So she has incorporated whatever her best judgment was on the edits. I haven't seen all the edits. I think I saw the August 13th one, which was fairly straightforward, so.
We were all set on editing last year, we were approving them last year. The reason why we kicked it out is there was so much discussion swirling about it, and like it was really long, and a lot of commentary about like opinions more so than just a real quick
Right.
idea of like what happened at the meeting. So-
Right, and she aggregated your comments. I think she also listened to the.
What I tried to do was to take the document that had the most recent draft based on the date it was modified, and then also looking at the title of the draft. So in many cases, it would have 4 sets of initials, for example, at the end, right? You can kind of see who's reviewing. And then I went through it again and tried to make sure that the language that was used, was objective. Went back and listened to the parts of the minutes where it looked like maybe there had been some disagreement about certain things, and tried to basically just follow the format that we've been using. Keeping simple language, but also giving context. I know in the original versions of the minutes, there were references to attachments or remarks, so I left those in and left those because I wasn't sure of the history of all that. But it was sort of my, it was my best effort, not having been here for it, to use what I believe is your most recent draft, and then listening to parts of minutes and sending it to you the way that we've been doing it.
When different people had different methods for dealing with it, like Jane had made some suggested changes, I think Hans made some suggested changes that Joanna and I didn't necessarily.
Oh, no.
Feel it
Yeah, you all
as well.
did.
I didn't even have any like text in it, so I don't think, but it was more like a process thing. I just
Right.
felt like it was too long, it was too
Right.
much like sort of editorializing.
Yeah.
We all had that
You can see
response.
And
brief,
that's
you can see how brief it is.
Was this kind of entire 1.5 page?
That's the
opening
attachments.
remarks?
That's my opening
That's
remarks.
And when there were
Yeah.
references to.
Everybody had been asking for where's the mayor's attachment, because they hadn't been attached last
So
year.
That was one of the things we asked them not to, was to have opening attachments.
For the
Remark
actual
attachments.
council meeting, so I did this for your benefit.
Mhm.
The way that this would actually be posted is if these are adopted, they would, on our website, in the section where the minutes go, it would just be the minutes, and where there's attachments, that's where attachments would be. So it'd be just like we've been doing, but I didn't want to just send you all one page of minutes that reference attachments with no
Yeah. Well, we were
context
asking
for
to
it.
not have attachments last year, so we felt like it was not really
No,
proper.
No, this is for your context now, so I didn't want you to have to go back and pull something up from your email.
Well, we were saying to not have this as an attachment on the website.
Okay,
Word
so-
documents.
No, that wasn't my understanding, so let me give you my understanding.
Mhm.
Because this isn't the only time I was reading prepared remarks.
Mhm.
And what happened was, eventually, council said, you don't have to do that. Can't you just sort of do a little summary at the beginning? And that's what I started doing. And that might have started either in October or November, where I just make a few remarks. I wouldn't write them for the meeting. I just made a few, and that's how we went forward. Because I respected that you didn't want to hear this, any kind of a monologue. So that's my recollection of how that process went to get rid of opening remarks. But once they've been done, they're in writing form. And
Mine-
that's what the minutes had said, so.
My recollection was similar about that it kind of changed later in the year, but a lot of that was in reaction to this period where there was a lot of like opening remarks and there was some temporal like attachments to minutes, and we were questioning whether or not we needed to do that. So that's why we put the whole thing on hold, was to suss out that discussion. But I don't remember ever agreeing like, oh, yes, let's go ahead and.
Well, that's
We were
what I
waiting.
said. That is you all had a viewpoint. You
But we
presented,
don't have, like,
you
seven
presented a
different
resolution. There was a more full-blown accounting in the minutes, and you wanted that pared down. But these are my remarks that I made as mayor.
So are all of our other meetings, they have an entire written thing that everybody says, or, no?
My take on this from wearing my clerk hat would be that if this was something that is available for residents at the meeting, then we need to include it as an attachment on the website. It's just good practice to have the information available, whether that's a resolution, whether that's prepared remarks. If it's a piece of paper that's here, it's a good idea to have it up on the website. I don't, it's hard to go back in time, obviously, but again, for if you think about the way that the council meeting documents are laid out on the website, in that minutes column would just be the minutes. There would not be any attachments there. Attachments are only not attachments column.
I understand, but I
Yeah.
feel like that's not that this hasn't really moved since, like, maybe there's some minutes, but it's really the same kind of thing. It's a summary of the meeting in a minutes form, and then it's a whole editorial attached to it.
Steve, I don't really want to adjudicate this whole thing all over again, but the resolution was, a page and a half, and, you all had that. I had an opportunity to speak to the town that same day, that morning of Saturday, and to give my version of it. So, there's the version that's within the resolution, and I admit what I did. And I admit that I was wrongly acting forward without consulting a 17-year-old document of contract.
I'm sympathetic to that point, and I feel like that is a fair
I mean,
trade,
that's,
because it shows both sides of that. And if this is more the exception than the rule, then...
well, I think it's a special meeting.
Yeah.
We say it's a special meeting, so it is an exception to the rule.
And we were worried it was going to open up like a can of worms, that it was going to be everybody coming like, well, you have prepared remarks, and person B and C have prepared remarks, and it hasn't come to that, so...
No, and
So
obviously
it's
you
not
all
much
had
more about-
prepared remarks for Saturday morning, July 28th. This was my
I didn't-
attempt. Well, it was, that's how it was all presented. Anyway, there was a motion on the table to approve all the minutes.
And I appreciate your advantage on that. So, I mean, I literally haven't had a chance to read them. I could try to read them during a break and then see if we could go that way and do it towards the end.
So would you like,
As I see this, the first page seems pretty clean and just reports the minutes of the meeting, which is the responsibility that we have to report the minutes of the meeting. What did we act on and what was discussed? And the same goes for the resolution, because that was the consensus of the town council, and this is a...
of the council, right? Because I don't vote on that. It was the council, yeah.
Can I finish? This is a resolution of the town council that was considered and decided on by the majority of the council. So that reflects an action that took place at the meeting. I agree with Steve that I think this is a lot of sort of nice language that helps to your page that rationalizes and explains the motives behind whatever action were taken by the mayor. Doesn't constitute an action by the council, and doesn't constitute the minutes of the meeting. It's a nice thing to have at the beginning of the meeting, but it doesn't constitute the business of the council. And I think we need to make sure we distinguish between the business of the council as presented through the mayor's agenda, as opposed to every person on the council and the mayor taking a position and saying, I need to be heard, and I'm going to write a 10-page document to make sure I'm heard. And I think we need to keep it simple. We need to keep it to the action that was taken by the council and not get sidetracked from that. And I consider this, I could vote for these minutes in July of 2018. I'd put them to rest if it weren't for this page.
Well, I
appreciate. I don't think this belongs as a part of the minutes of the meeting.
Well, I appreciate your opinion, although I respectfully disagree with it. This was an exceptional meeting, a special meeting that was called by council members, but as a town council, and the fact that it was specifically focused on me and my conduct, I think I have a right to put in the opening statement that I read that morning. So,
I will not pass these council meetings as minutes with the inclusion of this page.
okay, is there anybody else?
I'm in between on it, because this is a special case, and I'm sympathetic to that. I need having to think back to this time, I think we've come a long way since then, so I don't want to like overly dwell on it. Maybe I feel like it's an exceptional case, and just do 1 minute, it's a little bit out of the ordinary, and so it hasn't become a pattern since then to kind of do that, so.
So do you want to vote, or do you want to just take a moment, or have a break in the middle of this meeting? We were hoping it would finish.
How many votes, what do you need to approve the minutes?
Wait, what?
What do you need to actually?
Majority.
Majority of that? No, it's not unanimous, majority. So it's really just the three of us that have a dog in the street.
Well, all four can vote.
But, yeah, vote on minutes. if you're
Yes, we
saying.
can. He's here, we can, because there's always process and procedure and.
I'm just curious. Minutes. I take minutes like as a definition of meaning to be like a reflection of what happened. I don't know.
That's what I-
Does our town have a definition of what minutes are?
No, we loosely sort of follow Robert's rules, and with the Maryland Municipal Clerks Association would advise. But for this particular case, what you're voting on is the minutes. That's what I'm trying to explain. You're not passing the attachments as minutes. The minutes are just what says minutes. The attachments are in there to save you all from having to go back.
Oh, I see. So
And
that's,
get
that,
the
that
document
aligns
from your
with
email from last year.
Hans's point.
Right.
Those aren't minutes, that's not what he's being asked to approve.
What I would advise, to be transparent with your residents, is that if there are materials that were distributed at the meeting, those should be attachments. So separate column on our website. So minutes would just be the minutes.
Yep.
Then there's a column for attachments.
For things that were handed out, or
Right,
presented, or
that's where
shared.
this would go, as attachments.
And that's the protocol that
distributed
you
to the
follow.
meeting. I think it's advisable to do that, because if somebody's not there, they can still get the same materials that were on the table or
Yeah.
were handed out. So when you're voting to pass the minutes, it's just for the minutes, it's not for the attachments. It's not for the resolution, it's not for the list of the council members, it's not for the remarks. Those are attachments for that one.
Comfortable with that? That lines up with theirs.
As long as they're not considered part of the minutes. We're here to approve minutes, and this is being attached, in my view, as consideration of the minutes.
There you
And
go.
it doesn't belong there.
I would take them off, but it'll say, see attached remarks. I mean, that's what it says.
I don't want to make a big deal
I
of
mean,
this. I just,
Yeah, I
I
don't
think we have to
either.
be consistent, and
I don't
then we
either.
can't make up rules every
So-
time, for every meeting to be different from what they were before.
Doesn't seem like
Be
this,
consistent.
all right, do we want to, so we had a motion by Phil, but there was a discussion, and Stephen
There's no
mentioned.
second right now.
What'd you say?
There's not a second.
So either we have a second, or if there's discussion, Stephen did you want to insert a break in the agenda so you could peruse the rest of these minutes?
No, you
And
can't
we
do
have
that.
it
You can't
later?
read it while paying attention to what's going on in the meeting.
Yeah.
What's going on in the meeting?
Yeah,
I said a break in the
Okay.
meeting.
we had like an intermission.
Yeah, well, we
And I'm
can,
willing
we can
to-
always, we can take a break if
I'm willing
that's
to try
what
to
the council
scramble
wants.
with that, or maybe another alternative is if it meets the rulemaking, if we can say they're tentatively approved, and then we can just, if we have any comments, like email them in. But I don't know if that's gonna work or not.
Can't do a tentative approval
Yeah,
for what the auditor needs,
yeah.
right?
I think it's best to have it happen at a public meeting.
Does it have to be before the adjournment? Because I could try to do it like right after.
It has to be before the adjournment, it's during the public meeting.
Okay. And then we could just put it very last, even if we're all just sitting around.
Well, that's,
So everybody else is not bored, we'll just do it then. If that works.
if you get a break,
Is
you
that
want a break?
Is that okay for you, Hans, or?
Well, Hans, are you ready to vote, as long as you're fine that my opening remark is not part of the minutes?
Absolutely.
Okay, so Stephen, are you all right with that?
You're prepared to vote for them, or?
Yeah.
So it's leap of faith,
I
but-
want to make sure that we distinguish between the minutes and whatever attachments we do, and then the minutes is what we're voting on.
Okay. I'm fine with that, too.
Resolution
I'm
either.
tired of this topic.
Yeah,
All right, so may I have a second?
Second.
I'll second.
Okay, we got Dan as a second, and all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, okay. Thank you. Approved. The minutes are approved.
So we have to do ones for August 1st of 2019. And I must say, I have not read these. I have not read them.
Well,
I'm sorry, we still have one more minute set to go, and that's for August 1st
Oh,
of 2018.
I'm sorry, you're right. I
Um,
yeah, I thought we were just,
And I was
we
just
had
saying,
them all three as an item, so I was just thinking we were just approving all three at one time.
given the fact that, as I said earlier, my day and my last 4 days have been very hectic, I have not read these. I'm sorry, I have not reread them from when they were issued for approval last year.
Yeah. I mean, I read them back then, so I have to trust, like, if Andrea looked through this in detail, and Kaki did, and it's matching up with generally what we discussed last time, I'm fine to take the leap of faith that we're in good shape.
Yeah, I don't think there was much with even the August 1st one, which was really talking, that was a retreat,
There's,
a work
there's lot more
session,
routine
so,
business, yeah.
yeah. So, and August 13th, that was a council meeting, it's a regular meeting, so. If anybody has a better memory, then go forward.
Yeah.
Okay, do you want to just go ahead, so we've approved all three?
I'm
that
fine with
correct?
that, yeah.
In the past?
I want to be done with this stuff.
All right, good. All three have been approved. Thank you. I agree, let's not revisit. Okay, next on the agenda is presentations by residents. If there are any people who would like to present anything, come forward to what would become the microphone over here that Dan's holding. Any residents that want to say anything? Okay. We're going to move right on. Next is an action item on the agenda. And that's Town Manager Fox. It's the approval of leaf removal, the contract for, yes?
Looks like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm wrong. Chip.
We're
Sorry.
right ahead of the new business, right.
Yep.
So approval of a leaf removal contract, if you want to tell us a little bit about what
Sure.
we did and what you did.
So the town released an RFP for leaf removal services in accordance with our contracting procedures. We selected a vendor based on the criteria in the proposal. It was maintenance staff, George Miller and I were the selection panel. So we're requesting council approval to enter into a contract with Bethkey Landscaping. It's a one-year contract with 2 option years. The town has previously used Bethkey, somewhere between 15 and 30 years. They said 30, my stuff showed 15. So we're asking for looking for a new contract for calendar year 2019, so this coming fall, which represents the total cost is a 3% increase over the calendar year 2018 contract, and it'll be the same rate for calendar year 2019, 2020, and 2021.
Oh, we lock into that.
Is a fuel cost surcharge allowed?
I don't know, but the cost is, it's inclusive, and it's.
Okay, so they don't make an exception, because many of those contracts that are truck intensive or vehicle intensive allow an adjustment to the quoted price based on current fuel costs, especially if there's a dramatic change in fuel costs. And it goes both ways.
Yeah, so the way
And
that,
this is, Betsky is on, do they specify how many pickups they will do? Or is it just they will come and pick up as long as there are leaves on the ground?
it's weekly between October 15th and December 15th. So it's the same as previous years. My understanding is that they have also been flexible with us, so that if there's late leaves, that they tend to come by and pick those up as well.
Do we know whether or not those leaves all go to the county's composting facility?
What have we done in the past?
Yeah.
Well, we've done it in some years. I don't know whether they've consistently done it, but it'd be nice if we could have some stipulation in that contract. And I don't want to upset the apple cart, but we should have some stipulation that these leaves be processed into compost.
Did we have that stipulation in years past, Hans? Because
Yeah, well,
No.
if you go back enough years, we used to compost them ourselves.
No,
The
that's
whole
not the
area
point.
was-
The
I
point
know.
is what we
No,
may have had
absolutely.
in any
I'm
previous.
quite sure that was, I don't know whether it was
'Cause-
done in writing, but it was done verbally.
Right, Andrea was just following
Yeah.
previous
No,
contract
I would
wording,
just say,
so.
let's contact them and say, what do you do with these leaves?
Yeah, see if we can make that
Is there
suggestion.
cost impact if we cause you to, if we ask you to and stipulate that you compost these leaves?
Okay, all right, good point.
Did they put a time limit on, like, when's the last possible time they would come to pick up, or?
No, I mean, it'd be officially December 15th, but
Okay.
again, my understanding is that in past
In the
years,
past.
that
Yeah.
they'll come later than that.
They'll
if
come
needed.
when
They
they-
For
would-
years,
they
I've had to
work with us.
do leaves myself on Strathmore, because there's a couple of trees that don't drop until after New Year's.
Yeah,
I'm not sure why, but,
yeah.
All through
It'd be
town,
great if we can-
actually, we
Oh,
have
is
trees
it
like that.
more like that? Yeah.
Oh, I've got one in my front yard, the famous Chinese fringe
One
tree.
across the street.
Well, and if that being the case, is there any ability to have a later leaf pickup, or is it the guys who are gonna do it, or how do we?
I think if it was something that was written into our contract and their proposal, if it was official, then it would, I'm sure it would cost more than what they've proposed, because it's different than what I put in the RFP, the
They-
request for proposals.
They've been very good about making runs late in the year or early in the year, depending on where you are. They've done pickups in January.
Yeah.
In this
And-
past year, leaf pickup started late because
Right.
the leaves were
Yeah.
gone. So that's a case in point.
So there is some flexibility on the front end, like.
Yeah, I
That's
think
about-
Can you-
there's some things in here about, they'll make every effort to remove leaves on the dates that are referenced, but then there are delays for inclement weather. You know, they're not responsible for those delays, but there are delays for inclement weather. So I think this is sort of typical for how it's worked for the last 30 years.
Is it based on a number of pickups, or just a
It's
time?
weekly.
So,
Yeah.
but, let's just say for argument's sake, the weeks are like 12 weeks worth. So would that mean that we'd get 12 pickups, and for some reason, one was skipped because we had a snowstorm, they would give us that 12th pickup at the end, or
Yeah,
something to that
that's-
effect?
That'd be my best guess, yes.
Okay.
I thought you were going to ask if, we had this deluge of leaves falling, 2 days after they were just here, would they come out again during the same week to do another pickup?
I think that probably depends on what their workload is with other clients in towns.
Right,
Yeah.
Yes.
It's also weather dependent.
Right.
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 It just would be nice to see if they could get that mid-January pickup without it costing us extra, even if they, like, shift something, say, from early December to that, or.
I mean, my understanding from, because since I started that time of year, right, I started in December, and it was one of the, early conversations I had with Frank was that, we're gonna have to call Bethke and have him come back.
Okay, yeah.
And I don't remember getting any pushback from Bethke on coming back in January. So I think it's something that's just been
Okay.
sort of how we've done this.
Yeah, just work it out. Okay,
Yeah.
And they've
sounds
done
good.
a good
Yeah,
job over the
exactly.
years.
It sounds to me like we should be grateful and not proud about it.
Yep. 3%
Yeah.
in 3 years.
Yeah.
Okay. Would anybody like to make a motion to approve this?
I move to approve.
All right, is there a second?
Oh, okay. Good.
All right. I think Dan is the second.
Dan?
Not Dan, but
I mean, I'm sorry, Phil, Stephen?
Steve don't have enough facial hair to be Dan.
Sorry. Jane.
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 Jane second. Third.
Yeah. Okay. Hans made the motion first, and then Phil. No. Stephen. think I need a cup of coffee. And we have a note about asking about composting. Okay, new business. My item we put up front, so I'll just mention this. The question to cancel the September 21st Town Council retreat, and a proposal to reschedule it, maybe, for October? Is that a possibility?
Agreed.
I agree too.
Yeah.
Okay, so we will work on,
To be specific, after the council meeting.
okay, thank you. After we moved, so actually you'll see this,
Right, so
it's after October 21st,
Right.
because of the holiday.
Can we say not on the 30th?
Sure.
Why don't we just
Is
say
that
after the 21st, and Andrea will send out a little doodle
Yeah,
poll, and we'll
doodle poll.
schedule
Right.
it.
But I hear isn't that Halloween or something?
Yes.
Yeah, right. We have that for an agenda item to talk about
Okay.
in October. We'll get to that later. We'll get to that in October. There is something about that. Okay, thank you. So we will be scheduling after October 21st and before October 30th.
But you're proposing moving those two meetings, right?
Well, that's the next.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so the next business item is if you're all in favor, because we do have October 14th, a federal holiday for Columbus Day, and would it be all right if we move the meeting to October 21st, the next week?
I don't have a problem with it personally. I guess I don't have a problem with it for me. I guess the only concern I have is it confusing to people around town if they're used to council meeting being in the second Monday of every month, that this would change. I'm not
You
sure
know,
it's a big deal, but.
Right. We've had some changes before, like for being able to go to MML,
Mhm.
switching it up. And by the way, if the town council office, the town office is closed, right?
Not on Columbus Day, but
Not on
it is on
Columbus Day?
Veterans Day.
So the federal holiday doesn't apply to the local government?
No, but what is nice is that if we moved it on October 14th, I could potentially go to MML's fall conference,
You moved it?
if it's October 21st instead, and just an added benefit.
Mhm.
Where is that?
I can't remember.
Miami.
No, MML.
The
somewhere close
MML,
to
oh,
here.
that's, it's,
Hour away.
Hagerstown or.
it's in Cambridge. Yeah, Andrea and I might go too, I don't know. And you're all welcome to go. It's an MML fall
In
conference in
I'm fine
Cambridge.
with those dates.
Everybody okay with that?
I'm fine.
I'm fine.
Okay, let's go.
Okay, good, thank you. Next item to move is November. The November 11th Town Council meeting. The 11th is a Veterans Day holiday, federal holiday, and
Office is closed.
And the town office is closed, so we're proposing it to be the following week, the 18th.
Good.
Okay.
Okay?
Yep.
All right, that's great. Okay, the next item, I asked to put it on, and it's not that we have to have anything definitive out of here, out of what we're about to, or what I'm about to raise. I just thought it was worth bringing up here with the council, because there's been so much talk, so much concern voiced by residents around town, and this has to do with whether, it has to do specifically with the property on Kenilworth, which was Bob Ells? What?
Eleanor Melville.
Melville, sorry. Dr. Melville. And the house number is,
11112 Kenilworth.
okay, 1112.
1111.
Okay. 1112 Kenilworth. And the vampant decimation of all the trees on that property. And of course, now the house sort of sits there in destitute, like it's about to fall down. There's been so much concern that we granted a permit for renovations And little did we all know that, you know, the homeowner, and they have the right to take all the trees down. I bring it to all your attention just for something to consider, whether we need to look into this more. Is there something that, as a town, as a council, we want to do
I
to
would
keep
task the
that?
Arboretum Committee.
Pardon me?
I would task the Arboretum Committee.
To decide whether,
Well,
you
to
know,
come
we
up with
have
ideas.
any.
Come up with ideas.
Yeah, well, you know, we don't usually, it's not it wasn't on the historic register, right?
Yeah, it's ironic because that house is not in the county master plan for historic preservation, but when the National Historic District was made, all the write-ups were done. So like Peggy Pratt worked on that, getting the whole town declared as a National Historic Neighborhood. That's item number 8, that the sheet with all the history of that house. So it would be really a shame to lose it. So that, while it's on the National Historic Register listing, the whole big 100-some page document, it's not on the county master plan, which really just handles the couple of blocks over there and a few other houses around town and this building. Like six properties that are not in that contiguous district.
And for people here, for their awareness, if a homeowner's property is designated on the county historic plan.
Every project has to be reviewed. So,
Project
by the
and
county.
even the trees,
Yeah.
is my understanding. The
Yeah.
trees, even if they're not in the town's right away, but on the property, they are part of that design, you know,
Like a
part of that
historic area
permit.
Work permit or something
Right.
like that.
Yeah, if they're 6-inch caliper or more.
Right.
So that's part of the comprehensive package that goes off to the county, and the historic preservation group at the county, they review it alongside with DPS that does the building, and they'll also check zoning, kind of parallel to what we do.
So I just want to make sure everybody understands that, and that's, you know, we're sort of caught in in a, you know, rock in a hard place here, because this particular house doesn't have that standing, yet it's so old, we know, and, you know, what do we do going forward? You know, we've tried not to get too prescriptive on what homeowners can do, so we've had, you know, certain zoning rules and so forth that the council has put, over the years, put out, but here's an issue about, you know, trees, completely wiped out. So Hans suggested, yeah, let's see if the Arboretum want to address that. Do you all want to talk about any other ideas?
I think that's a good idea. I guess it's just a little different. There are some other towns that are arboretums in this county, and they have jurisdiction over the public land and the private land. Ours just happens to be, it's the public land only, so it's really more of a catalog of street trees mostly, and a few parks here. It's different. I think Washington Grove maybe is one of the ones that is the other way around. I'm not sure which others, but
So
kind
are
of
you
a jig
saying,
for that? But
so are you saying that some other municipalities, they actually catalog the trees, not just in the public domain, but as well as on the private?
everything within
Oh.
town limits. I don't know if they
Oh.
get treated differently, if it's a different type of review. Like,
Sure.
I never lived in one of the places that had it that way.
Yeah.
They do.
I've lived somewhere, it wasn't here, it was in California, where there were, certain trees were of a historic nature, and so
Mhm.
those trees were treated differently than
Oh.
just town right-of-way trees.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
We,
I think there's.
other than this specific example that you're talking about, like, is this a recurring problem, or is this a once every decade or two
That's a
problem?
good question. I don't know. I
I
just know
think
it's
it's-
been really talked about a lot this past year, so I just wanted to bring
Yeah.
it
I
to your
think it's the
attention.
fact that it's not one tree, it's all the trees on the property. You know, you've got wonderful trees all the way around the house, and now it's,
Yeah.
not only is the house been stripped down, so it looks pathetic and sad, but all the trees are gone.
Right.
Are you
No,
familiar with the property?
Yeah, I guess all I was gonna say is I'm cautious to like pass rules
I know.
about one, albeit incident that,
Yeah.
you know, we're not happy with,
Mhm.
only because, you know, we're all homeowners,
Mhm.
and,
Yeah.
you know, do
Do you
there's
really?
like a tree in my backyard, and,
I
you know,
understand.
I already deal with all the historic stuff, and like,
Yeah.
I own the house, I can't replace a window. I mean, some of the rules are bonkers.
Mhm.
And now it's like, hey, that tree, you like it, I don't like it. I mean, if we saw a ongoing problem and people were coming in and like clear cutting, I'd be the first one to say, we gotta protect our town. If this is the first homeowner in the last decade that's come in and like wipes out their stuff, do we want to create a rule that then the rest of us has to live with, considering that most people here seem pretty reasonable? So that's my thought.
I
But
agree.
I agree it's an important
Yeah.
topic.
Yeah, and I hear you on that, and I agree, and I'm very sensitive to, letting, homeowners be able to, manage their property. But that was an interesting comment that Andrea made about if it's a really old or, has some historical standing, if a tree, that's a very different out-of-the-box thinking. I think that's a neat one to think about. And, I don't really know that we have a lot, and of course, we'd have to define all that. But I can give you one example. The tulip poplar, actually, that is, I wish I was part of that little joke.
Don't have a chestnut tree on your property.
Oh, the tulip poplar that is on the corner of Albemarle and Rokeby, and I do not think it's a town tree, but it was being considered as a possible champion, either state champion. Do you remember anybody with me when we did the tree walks and we had the mayor of Washington Grove, who herself I think is an arborist, and she's on some kind of champion tree commission for Maryland, and she was like, wow, look at that tree. Anyway, that's like, whoa, what would we all do if we saw that huge, it's huge tree?
We have one that's a
Yeah.
national champion, I think. The Salkova, I think it's Eileen that lives on.
That's
No.
a different species, but you're right,
that's a
it's in the
national
back,
champion,
right?
yeah.
Okay, well, I'll take it up with the Arboretum Committee and see what they think. I don't want to get overly prescriptive either, so, we've got to have some reasonableness in it, so we'll see what happens.
Yeah,
Okay?
maybe there's something that falls way short of saying all trees, but
Oh, absolutely.
more than
Right.
zero.
That's why I was curious about Andrea's comment.
Could I make a one sentence note here?
Could you speak on the record there, Dick? You always have good things to say. It'd be great to have your name on there.
Dick Pratt, 11112 Rokeby, and I just wanted to note that I think that Peggy would wish it recognized that the National Register work was a joint effort, that in addition to herself, Dave Ami contributed heavily.
Okay. Thank you, Dick. So it was also Dave Almy who worked on that National Register plan with Peggy Pratt on the historic houses.
I've forgotten that, even though David told me stories about doing it, so.
Does anybody else want to say anything about that? We'll just move on. Okay.
Oh.
So I'll follow up with the Arboretum Committee. And I believe the last item under new business is Phil's interest in process to approve or standardize or make transparent a vacant council seat process, whatever.
So
Start it.
basically what I've got in mind is the process to, keep some feedback here. So basically what I have in mind is some, these people, we'll try back, maybe they'll, no, maybe rather, we'll see. So what I was talking about was a process for selecting a candidate for a vacated seat, if a council member vacates a seat, and then also the process to vacate the seat. In other words, do we want to have a formal resignation that might have a template or something? Do we want to have, that says, I hereby resign my council seat, blah, blah, effective, whatever? I mean, is that something we want, or is it up to the person to write whatever they want, or do we just say include specific language in it? So that's one piece, and then when we get to the selection piece, according to the charter, as I recall, it says that, the council is the one who will select the person. Do we enlist help from, say, the town staff or town to help publish or do whatever to reach out to people? Do we have standardized questions? Do we have even a debate, if you will, if somebody wanted to, if we had multiple candidates? do we have a time frame to do this within? In other words, do we say we're going to keep ourselves limited to the next council meeting, or no more, no less than, say, 2 weeks, no more than to the next council meeting, or something like that? I'm just trying to establish maybe some type of framework that we could use. The same thing with resignations. Do we have do we say, the resignation should be ideally within some period before a council meeting to allow us time to be able to do something? Or do we allow it at a council meeting? I mean, I'm just trying to come up with maybe some guidelines to make things simpler, so that somebody decides I'm going to step down, they can give us that. It won't be like, hi, I'm going to resign right now, and then all of a sudden we're left with, well, we got to hurry up and do something. What are we going to do? Versus saying, we would like you to resign. If you're going to thinking about resigning, to resign, at some point such that we have enough time to do something, versus dragging it out for an extra few weeks or something like that. I mean, they're just thoughts here.
Anybody want to have some comments? I had asked Andrea, as the clerk of the council, to contact Ron for any more explicit guidance, and we can share that, but I'm first open to hearing if
I mean,
you all want to
that
discuss.
would be my first question. Are there any other best practices out there that is just does someone else have a process that, we could have? It seems reasonable to put a bit more process to it.
It might make it easier on future councils if they have this, like, we just happen to have this happen twice within a year, but I don't know if I've ever heard of it happen really before my time in this town. Yeah,
It happened, well, in a weird, twisted way. It happened many, many years ago, and I'm looking over here at Dick or Ken, that a council member was asked to leave, and I don't remember the circumstances, whether it was too many meetings missed, or, in the charter, it talks about for misconduct and other things that the council has a right to ask for a resignation. But, and apparently it was done once, many years ago. I'd almost want to say at least 50 years ago, so, I don't know. 50, yeah.
Andrea, are there best practices out there?
When we emailed Ron about it, our attorney, he didn't believe that any of his other clients have a written policy, but he felt like it was a good idea to have one. And his guidance was recommended procedures should be having in addition to having some sort of policy procedure document, that you might think about procedures being having a call for candidates, an interview of the candidates, perhaps at an open meeting where residents can ask questions too, and then appointment by majority vote.
You want to also describe that voting?
Yeah, so the motion,
process?
the motion to appoint a new council member does not need to take place at an open meeting. And then Ron says, however, as a matter of policy, that may be preferred for transparency's sake. It does not need to take place at a meeting because it's an administrative function, and the Open Meetings Compliance Board has already ruled in on this, basically. Also, the taking of the oath does not have to be at a meeting, because per our charter, it's the mayor that does the oath, so council action is not necessary for the swearing in of the new council member. So those are just other items that were clarified.
And because this is an administrative action taken by the council to make the selection or the appointment, in other words, it also doesn't need to be held to the Open Meetings Act. Although, to repeat what Andrea just said, for transparency and goodwill across the town, it's recommended. But so you all know what we heard from Ron. And this came up before I ever knew that we were going to end up having this on as a new business. That was just Andrea and I doing our due diligence to make sure we're doing everything okay.
I wouldn't mind putting together some sort of suggested best practice based on the experience this body's had recently, and for future councils to consider. Maybe not necessarily need to go as far as revising a charter to have any specific directions there. It seems like it's more broad in there. It's just pretty plain that, the council is responsible to select a replacement, but
Even if we wrote a memo on it,
Yeah.
someone could refer back to in the future.
Yeah,
Like, hey,
it's-
what have they done last time? And, we take these steps, that way it's not a,
Right, it's well documented, right.
Ken Schwartz on Claremont. In terms of the other suggestion that Phil made, in terms of should there be a letter or some
Can't
document?
hear you very well.
Should there be a letter or some other document for someone who's retiring from the council before the end of their term? Yes, there was actually, as my recollection, there was a council member in the past, but I've been here 35 years, and it was within the 35-year period that one was asked to vacate their slot for non-attendance of council meetings. There was also Stuart Kaufman, who died on the council, so you couldn't have any process for that.
Right, and
Right.
I would caution against getting too prescriptive on what, on a person
Right.
having to sign a document saying that they're going to vacate their position for a variety of reasons, like those two, as single examples.
All right, good point, and I'm glad to know that little bit of history. So it wasn't 50 years ago, it was more like 30-some years ago.
Isn't that?
Interesting.
No,
If all you may remember, when Joanna resigned in November, she had a very brief letter that she issued for her official resignation. But I agree with Ken, we shouldn't make this, I wouldn't do an exact, explicit verbiage and so forth. But, sorry, go, Phil, what
Okay.
are you thinking? I mean,
I'm
you
thinking
need
I
a
would,
few
because I
elements.
don't want to have, I mean, my concern is that there's no confusion, that if a person says, oh, I might want to resign, and then decides to change their mind, or, oh, I'm going to resign, and then they decide they want to hold on for a couple more meetings, whatever the case may be, it's like you know, the resignation is effective when something, I don't know, it can be as simple as a letter, whatever it is, but there's some document or something that says the person's formally resigning, and that's time definite. We can say, okay, from that point forward, we now go through the process and vote somebody in.
Right.
And so I just want to eliminate any confusion by make it ambiguous, I want to make sure that it's not, that, yes, in the past, typically people have provided some type of document that says, I hereby resign. That's all I'm asking. And of course, there would have to be exceptions if somebody unfortunately keels over, or has an accident, whatever the case may be,
No, I think, even as Dan said, I think having, and Stephen, is having some kind of a process where we got some kind of standardization as well as it being documented, so that we can always refer back, and I like the fact that it's not an ordinance or a charter change, but because, there are things that, change or evolve over time. So.
that's why, do we have just sort of like a bulletin or a memo or a policy, or, you know what I mean, like something that we can just agree to? There's no like way to.
So there's like the charter, and then there's the ordinance, and there's rules that are below it, but I don't know if we even want to make that a rule versus something that's a best practice
That's
suggestion.
what I'm saying, just a document. That way, if someone
Yeah.
wants to resign, they'd ask the town manager, hey, what's up with resigning? She would say like, oh, well, here's this document about, here's kind of the recommendation. So you can't prescribe what someone does on the way out the door, but if they're willing to follow the protocol, and then I think the remaining council members would, like what we're going through now. What's the process? Well, like, hey, look at this memo, and
Yeah.
it just seems reasonable.
Yeah. And it would keep it a little bit open too. What if it doesn't happen again for another 30 years, and what we think now doesn't really
Right.
apply
It's true.
to that culture, so.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're in this process now. So I'm not here to put anybody on the spot or, hash out a process.
we still have,
But we also know, I'm sorry,
we still have some time.
you have time, and we know that Jane has sent an email to everybody that she plans, if not to resign officially October council meeting, that she may put a statement out sooner than that. So we are at a point here where we have to, I have to ask, Andrea and I have to ask you all, are you going to make a decision in the next week about putting out a resident call, a town, and who would do it? And, you know, I mean, maybe you asked a question about how should the town office be involved in this, or should it be involved at all?
Right.
So is that something at this point that you think you're going to want the town office to put out for you all, or are we leaving that all up to you to just decide among yourselves when you're going to put the call out?
Well, sorry.
it goes out
but Didn't
wide.
the call go out?
Yes, but now, you know, it had a deadline. It had a deadline of,
I guess the way I see this current thing is, everybody heard that, or, you know, word gets out, right? Jane's resigning. You guys hear that, you put that out.
Jane actually advised us to put it
Sure,
out.
regardless,
Yeah,
it went
Andrea,
out, the
yeah.
folks in town noticed, like,
Mhm.
got notice. I think people that were interested, we have a couple of folks, we should do our due diligence, make sure we talk to those folks, express how appreciative we are that folks are interested, which is awesome, and then pretty quickly come to a consensus. And we don't need a meeting to vote, right? We don't have to follow the
Right.
open meetings guidelines in order to vote.
Right, although for transparency, it was recommended, you know, that was the recommendation. And I should say that this is what Ron Balt has said has happened in the past.
Sure,
so-
but I was only saying for expediency,
Mhm.
rather than potentially waiting until the next meeting.
Right, because Jane is only waiting to see and hear from you all that you're able and ready, you know, that you'll be able
So
to make
for
a
me,
decision.
maybe we just each say what we need. I just need a couple more days to make sure I can talk to the folks, so that I know where I am and I can feel like I can diligently say, this is my vote. I don't need any longer than that, and I don't feel the need to publicize it more than that.
Keep in mind, of course, we can't vote until somebody actually resigns.
Well, that's true.
But we
Until-
can
until-
express
well,
our
we can-
interest of who we're
Yeah.
voting for.
Well, we know
Certainly
she
can.
is.
Certainly can.
We know she is. She has stated that. We just don't know exactly. It's between now and October.
And that was the reason why he's saying about the recommendation of having something formally written, was because it's not ambiguous. It's like, okay, I'm done, and that's that. But I understand, I'm not trying to belabor a point here. And yes, I think it would be a good idea if we debate amongst ourselves, so we're prepared, so that when we have the opportunity to, we can take a vote and be done with it.
Because the reason also I think we want to do it quickly is so the people could be informed, and then we can schedule a retreat.
Mm-hmm.
That too.
So it just seems that sooner is better, as long as each of us feels that we've had the chance to, you know, do our diligence. So that's what I need.
I'm fine with it.
We talked about now hashing out all the details, but we
No,
need hashing out all the details.
well, I think the question here is whether for openness, transparency, and goodwill, I'll refrain from using the goodwill. Openness and transparency for town residents, I think we need to know at some point very soon whether or not there will be another town call to go out for more candidates or not. And I think you all owe that to the residents, to know whether
So I'm not advocating for another
Right.
one. I think one is plenty.
I think we've already gone through that process, in my opinion.
I think I'm undecided and I want to hash it out here, so.
Can't hear you.
I'm undecided and I don't want to hash it out here, so.
Yeah. And I would say, I'm not opposed. Email it out every day if we want. I mean, you know, my style is always like forward march, so.
I guess I'm in a similar thought on that, like I don't want to bar anybody else that is still interested just because of that deadline, that the council that's voting did not set that deadline. And I didn't even realize until, thank you for sending an email, I didn't realize that Janie had made the request to put out a call, so.
She did, and we knew, I don't remember the deadline. Was it just last Wednesday or the Wednesday before? But we wanted to be sure, because at the time, she was going to resign today, and we wanted you all to have your time
Yeah.
to discuss, vet with the candidate, you know, candidates
wasn't
can
even here
discuss.
last week, and then it's Labor Day weekend. It's just a lot to,
Yeah, and
kind of like Jan
She
meant.
apologized.
Yeah, it just is what it is, and
course, we didn't know
everybody
your
had,
schedule
yeah,
either,
yeah,
so.
everybody had good intentions on it, but we'll work it out.
And Hans, where are you on just timeline?
I think, I would like to get it done, but of the two applications that came through, they didn't begin to answer the questions that I had of a council person, what's their fiscal philosophy, what is, do they see themselves as consensus builders or mavericks? Do they are they willing to work hard and put in the time? Just basic stuff on the basis of which I would make a decision. I really don't, it's not appealing to me to know where they work or what they do. It's interesting, but it doesn't help me make decisions about what kind of person we want on the council. And I think it would be useful to have a guideline for a statement that goes out that says, here's the kind of stuff that council members want to know about you, so they can make a choice for the kind of colleague that they look forward to working with. And I think that maybe things should just do, and I don't want to make light of it. The next person who just threatens to resign from the council has a task of putting something like this together until we vote on it and say it's the working process.
It would be kidnapping if you forced someone to remain on
I'm
the council,
just
but I
kidding.
understand the
No,
premise.
I just found that I didn't get enough information on the two documents that came through on the internet.
Do you want to do that in person with those folks?
Well,
That's my plan. I'm halfway through the list with in person. I just gotta get to the other half.
okay. That's
Yeah,
a
and
possibility.
I
That's
want
a
to be
possibility,
fair.
But that means a lot of time being taken up because their schedule may not work.
Sure.
And then if there are 5 council members who want to do the same thing, you're talking about 2 weeks minimally, maybe 3.
But right now, it's 4 council members and 2 candidates.
Yeah.
Is anybody opposed to additional candidates coming forth if they submit information?
I'm not
we
opposed
did.
at all.
Because I'm not, because I feel like we didn't set that deadline, the 4 of us that need to vote on this, so. If nobody else is opposed, and
Well, we could
We
say.
gotta
since
set the
we-
deadline then.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
do we want to set a deadline now and
Yeah.
ask them to send it out and decide that? Because then that,
if you 3 are comfortable
Is
with that, I am.
yeah, because if
Do
you
we-
like
do
it,
we-
there's no downside.
Do we know when Jane wants to say sayonara?
Jane has said in her email to us, to
Okay.
all of us,
Okay.
When
That
4 of us are ready.
she said she's willing to stay on till October,
Right.
but she also recognizes that if council is ready sooner, that she can just submit a official statement of resignation, and it doesn't have to be done during a council meeting. So she made that very clear.
But I did think it
So
would
she's
be,
really trying to pace this with, according to your pace,
So what's the date today? 9th?
the
Yes.
9th.
So then, what if we said, hey, can you send out an announcement, like a follow-up announcement, with a deadline of the, I don't know.
Next Monday?
The 17th,
Okay.
and we would ask for any candidates to also, provide a statement, so we have some insight,
Like a
give me-
candidate statement and interview them.
Sure, so just like, whatever Hans's questions are there.
I
What do you
think,
think? Are you a maverick? Do you believe in nuclear fuel? The
Nuclear
basics,
freeze zones.
the important basics here in Garrett.
okay,
Plastic straw.
That's right, do you use plastic
obviously,
straws?
obviously, we can't, we would prefer that you all come up with a few questions, and that's what Ron Bolt actually also mentioned. So you give us a few questions you specifically want to have addressed. That might be another way that they can also write towards, in addition to whatever other,
So just want to give her those questions now.
Or can we just email all 4 of us email Andrea tomorrow and then put that together? I guess we can email each other too, and make sure we're not asking the same question or we don't have too many. But I feel like also on the balance of this, we don't need to make it like a huge writing assignment, a big onerous thing. Like maybe half of what a regular bio would be for an election.
and while this is a good practice, and I'll say it, just because nobody is saying it, but this is, I just want everybody to know, this is not what was done back in last November. But I respect that this is probably a more rigorous kind of process, which is probably a good one.
As the council member who slid in under the wire, I would agree that there's no downside to a more, you know, like prescribed process where the communication is there and doing it efficiently. That way we can respect anybody who shows their interest and, you know.
We can
So-
level the playing field essentially.
But I also would like to note, well, I don't know if I totally agree with that, but like, I like to also note that both the process before and this one we're talking about now, they're both in accordance with the charter. Like, there's nothing about,
Yeah, sure.
No, no, I
nothing
just,
that's unfair
I just-
about it. Everybody was.
well, like, you know, I'm looking at what could possibly have been a double standard now.
I don't
So
think-
anyway, may
I don't
I-
think it's that. I just
Okay.
think it's about it trying to improve the process.
And that's where I want to hold it to, yeah.
I think
Since you all
remember
have
that's why
asked-
we talked about these minutes for so long. So like trying to like jab in like extra little commentary. Can we just like keep it on the topic? You know, it's making sort of half-hearted
Okay.
judgments like it was untoward like what was done before. It was fully in accordance with
Okay.
the
You know,
charter, so it's not-
yeah, we aren't going to go back and rehash that part of the process either, which we know is, so anyway. If we are making the deadline, if you're thinking that the deadline would be next on the 17th, how quickly then, and we're going to have to put this on you guys, how quickly can you get back to us on what your questions, specific questions might be, so that prospective candidates have a chance to, think about them and write about them. You don't want to, we don't want to put the call, when do you want to put the call out? If we're going to go out with a call and we want to give them back till the 17th, we'll need something from you very quickly.
I say you put the call out tomorrow morning with a statement that says questions, additional information will be forthcoming within the next couple of days, and we pick some day that it
I
is.
think you just want to send one email. I would
Okay.
send
I
one
agree.
email, here's the call, here's the deadline, and
Alright.
with your
Do you all-
response, answer these 3 questions.
Do you all think you could get us your questions Wednesday morning? That means you have tomorrow to talk,
I don't have any
by-
questions, so I don't need to be involved
by
in it. So
emails.
whoever is going to send that to you is good. I'm just going to talk to folks
That's
in
fine.
person.
Fine to me.
Okay,
That's fine with me.
all right.
Oh,
So
Hans is, well, Hans, are you okay with that? I mean, really?
all right, so we'll look for something from you by Wednesday morning, and we'll put the call out that day, and the deadline will still be the 17th, unless you now want to push that to maybe the Wednesday, and give it a 7-day.
It's fine by me.
Which,
18th is
18th?
fine if it.
Yeah,
that's
okay, the
same-
18th, yeah,
seems to be a
fine.
week, so.
all right, we'll look for some information from you all. That's great. Yes.
I can speak loud enough. Wouldn't council member, she hasn't resigned yet, if she wanted to, wouldn't she have a vote?
No.
She hasn't resigned yet.
We can't vote until after she
The,
resigns.
the actual vote must happen after she has stepped off. Yeah.
So if she resigns on October 1, it's presumably after.
We can
Yes.
make up
It
our
would be at
mind
the,
before she resigns. We
what
just
is it?
can't
Would be
vote
the
until
October
after she
21st council meeting, right?
I mean, she could theoretically submit questions or any comments she wishes on the process. That's because she's still a council member.
She is. Right.
She could. I don't get the overwhelming sense she wants to, but
Agreed.
Yeah, that's not the way it was, well, I guess not
Agreed.
the way it was done in the winter.
All right. I think we've got a path forward here and a few dates that we're working with, and we'll look forward to hearing from you all. Thank you for bringing that up. Phil, okay, town updates. How are we doing? Okay. Let's see how quickly we can wrap this up. SRTS, I put a note out to the whole town. I've also been keeping council up to date. So what we heard this morning, actually, from State Highway is that they've got, as far as we know, they've got all the paperwork now with all the appropriate wet signatures, and that they are just having the, I think it's the Division of Construction or Department of Construction, reviewing this whole, what we call the concurrence and award package. And it is up to them to make the final determination of approval of that. Concurrence and award package was what the town submitted to the state highway, in which the town recommended who we believed was the lowest and responsible bidder. And those three things are very different. So anyway, we've gone through all that, and the council went all through that. We were all, unanimous about what we thought should go forward. So that is what's happened. You also may know that the lowest bidder withdrew. They withdrew by a formal letter of request, that which was one of the things that the state highway, I guess it was last week, I'm not sure even what week anymore, that they asked me to go ahead and agree with that withdrawal letter. I should tell you, I guess the one thing we're still kind of waiting on is whether state highway is going to have to get concurrence from the state attorney general. That seems to be unclear, although it's listed in the COMAR, the Code of Maryland Regulations. So whether there's still one more stamp of approval that has to go, or if it's just going to be the construction office and that's it, and it stays there and that's it. One other thing, as you probably know, the funding, we're nearing final agreement on the funding with this lowest responsive bidder. And that the state has agreed to fund this amount, and with the town putting in the full 40 that you all had voted on. When was that? September? Was it last September, or was it
Long time
January?
ago.
Yeah. So they came back and agreed to that, so that's where it is. We don't, they did send.
And is SHA agreeing with the consideration of the lowest bidder withdrawing, and have they've accepted that?
SHA wanted us to agree to that, yes.
No, but has SHA agreed with the bidder that they may withdraw?
They are definitely agreeing
Okay.
for the
Okay.
lowest bidder to go ahead and withdraw. And that lowest bidder has every right at this point,
I
because
understand.
there's never, just for everybody's understanding, there was never any notification sent to the lowest bidder that they were not going to be selected. So they had up until whenever that decision would have been made to go ahead and put in a letter of withdrawal. And so you have to honor that, basically. Basically, we have to honor that. And that's what they basically came back and said, they had a right to do it. I talked with the state procurement office, by the way, in the Maryland State Procurement Office, and they also assured me this is the process that goes. It's also the easiest process, because it really avoids any protest. Because otherwise we would have, as we did, our initial concurrence and award package included a justification for why the lowest bidder was not responsible. And that can always be, has two sides to everything. This was a withdrawal letter. You honor it. It makes everything easier. So that's how we went.
Question about the funding there, because we
Go.
had voted on whether or not to have, there was talk of a potential match, like if there was an overage, then
80-20.
the town would match up with an 80-20, but then later on, so we agreed to that as a backstop in the event that was needed, thinking that may not be or probably wouldn't be needed. It turns out the contract was over when you take the not lowest bidder, but then there was talk after that of that the state was going to just go ahead and honor that difference, 100% funding, I think it was called. But then, so it sounds like that's changed back to 80-20.
No. let me qualify that. When we were talking about the 132 that came from, that the state said that they would put up, that was if we would go ahead and put in, I think it's 18, to look on the budget line item.
Yeah, we moved it
And
to
that
that
was
category.
going to, maybe it was 22. It was it was recognizing that that was that was the formula to arrive at that number was an 80-20 formula, but then state came back and said, we will give all 100% of that 132 before you ever had to tap into any of your funds, okay?
But then you take all of the overage.
And now we're in a greater overage,
Yeah, over that, okay.
and so they're giving
If
us
it
even
runs over,
additional.
we have a bigger
Yeah.
piece.
All right, and I kind of not sure that I want to get into the details in a
Yeah,
public
I-
meeting on the numbers, but they are now giving additional money, and it's going to be at the 100%, but it was with the caveat that we did agree to the full 40. And we did all talk about this back in April when we opened the sealed
Yeah.
bids and the speculation of what was going to have to happen with funding. And you all did approve that. And we all have that in the SRTS capital budget line. We have 22 and 18 or something like that. So, yeah, we have the 22, and then we had the 18 in reserve, knowing that that might have to get moved eventually. So that's my update for SRTS. One thing, they said that they hoped they would get a notice to proceed by the end of September, which then means that we work with the contractor to hope to start in October. That is my hope.
Just in time for the leaves.
Yeah, yeah. But you know what I was thinking, and I'd love to hear the Arboretum's thought on this. Andrea and I were thinking about this. You know, in the fall and the winter, that's when the trees stop flowing. The sap stops flowing, and they sort of go into a dormant stage. That might be actually the best time to be, if you're gonna, we're taking care of the roots, some of it's gonna be hand excavated around tree roots and tree bridges. Maybe that is the best time. I don't know, that's just a thought.
It wouldn't hurt to ask
Yeah.
the committee
I
and
didn't
Phil
know if any
Normandy
of
about.
you all knew, but yeah.
No, I don't.
Okay. Hans, would you like to talk to us a little bit about the stormwater? And I'm sorry, we are getting a
We're
little
gonna
late
meet-
on this.
We're going to have a meeting on Wednesday on this, and our focus will be on the two projects that are the most demanding, the most important at this point. One is Lower Kenilworth, Rokeby, the other one is Claremont Avenue. And the goal is simply to figure out where we are and what additional information we need and what problems, if any, we see with the quotes that we've gotten, to make sure we start focusing in on honing in on what needs to be done and on the basis of which we can come up with a recommendation for the town council. That meeting's on Wednesday.
Right, and it's a task force, so really what, the steps inside that, this is a mayor's task force, is if there's any modifications to the current recommendations that had been studied and presented by Clark Azar to the town on July 1st. So we have that. And, you know, meeting, as Hans said, meeting with the neighbors that have these issues, seeing if there maybe is something else out of the box or just some modifications. I don't really think there needs to be more study unless we're really looking at something out of the box solution. And then we'd want to get, you know, as I had mentioned in an email, that I would like to get some priority ranking of the solutions by the group that Andrea and I can then take to, we can discuss and take it to the county. And there's some interesting new information that we learned where the county actually has right-of-way on the downstream side of the creek of the bicycle path at Rokeby. So the county has all that right-of-way in there, and we definitely would like to get the county to have some input here and see if they'll help us out. So anyway, and I have asked Chuck to be chair. We've gone out with a couple calls before for the task force group, and members had said that they don't feel as qualified, so I've asked Chuck to go ahead. Chuck Berry, who's back here, said that, you know, he would do it, so I'm asking Chuck to be the chair
For the stormwater.
for the stormwater, yeah.
For that committee, I would recommend taking a look at the land use task force report, because I think it was a really good report that group had done, where they study things thoroughly, and they just made very clear recommendations that went in the final report, like a cover letter. So it's been useful for me to be able to go back and use that as a reference, like how clearly it was done.
Okay, Stephen, anything with the town hall? Actually, there's a few things happening.
Yeah, so still working on the planning, but one of the other big movers is George Miller's been out attempting to paint, and he saw a lot of the same things I had seen when I looked at the siding before with Frank from maintenance, that a lot of it's just arguably beyond repair. It's so old, and this building was built on a budget when it was built. I think I was told it was like $33,000 in like today's money, what it was reported that this building was built for. So it's probably not like the highest grade of materials all around, but a lot of the siding is actually not original, including like the front below the triangular part at the top, the pediment. All the shingles are original at the top, the shakes, but the siding on the bottom is all newer. So I'm going to prepare with the Historic Preservation's Committee's help an application to the county to request that we can replace all the non-original siding, just get something that's new and substantial, and paint it and have it look good for the long term, rather than continue to patch it. So that's the main update on that. We're trying to schedule that meeting for Historic Preservation, but it was scheduled for this week, but I think we're going to have to push it out because of a couple issues, but we'll work on that.
Stephen, can I ask a question? Can you remind us then how much has been painted so far?
I only saw it with George when he was kind of like just starting, and he repaired some of the wood. I think he did a lot of the front.
All the front,
Yeah,
part of the side.
all the front. Yeah,
Does that include the bell tower?
No,
Okay,
yeah.
all right.
I
Well,
think he was moving to the north side and then the south side, but
if you all get a look as you pass by from the curb, and hope you give it a thumbs up that it has at least a little bit better curb presence, curb appeal.
and he's trying to make it look good for the short term, or we're
Yep.
trying to come up with a plan for the longer term to
Right.
do something that's historically appropriate and
Right,
looks solid.
thank you.
And
So the
is solid.
plan, right, so the plan had been for, pretty much just a cosmetic kind of makeover for the front. Okay,
And that was always like the plan to do a short-term cosmetic, but the longer term, we'd always suspected it wasn't original, but I'm hoping that it's a good trade in this case here. Like usually historic preservation at the county level, and Dan may be able to attest to this, they're obsessed with windows. Here, the windows are relatively good for an 1890s building, so we're hoping that they'll look favorably on the fact that we are, can be dedicated to saving the windows, and a lot of them still have the wavy glass, and in trade for that, almost like just be reasonable on the siding. So hopefully that's the case.
okay. We have here, you want to talk about the land use, or is there anything on the land
Yeah,
use to
just-
talk about?
Just one major issue, like we were talking about, I did a little bit of a explanation on what it is that the county was looking at doing, relaxing the rules and making it more easy to do accessory dwelling units. So in the past, you'd been able to build an accessory apartment with a special exception that build it within your house. But a lot of other jurisdictions around the country, like Portland's one of the biggest ones for this, I think Seattle as well, and other counties around here are looking at it too, like be able to build almost like a cottage on your backyard and be able to rent that out either to somebody in your family or to somebody that's not your family. County council seemed very enamored with this idea, so they pushed it pretty hard trying to get it through, and they voted on it, I think it was June or July, and I believe it was a unanimous vote that they approved of this in theory. So it's not set to go in action until December, I believe. So between now and then, we need to do a little bit of work to kind of see what exactly was put in that that final approval piece, and then how that's going to affect Garrett Park with its zoning, or its land use. And just for a little bit of context on it, like they had talked about doing it where you could build up to 1,200 square foot if the formula, there's a percentage formula, like the percentage of your lot, there's a max amount of accessory dwelling unit you could put on your lot. But if you could meet that maximum, you could put a 1,200 square foot house in your backyard. And for a little bit of context, the average Chevy house is 9-something. So this is something that is kind of ironic for Garrett Park, that there was a lot of discussion about Chevy houses almost 100 years ago, and here we are again about talking about putting a second house that is a Chevy house kind of size thing potentially on some of the lots in town. I don't think that's going to apply to too many lots here, because you need a pretty substantial total area. But it's one of the things we have to look at, in addition to, like, what do we do with a corner lot? Like, I think county council, they've had a little bit of tunnel vision on this, or in my opinion, a lot of tunnel vision on it, but they've been thinking about it as like a pretty pure thing where you would have a house in the front and a house in the back, and there's 2 side yards and adjoining yards. But we have a lot of properties in this town where it's a oblong lot that has a side street that goes along and the main street in the front, and that house faces the front street. What do we do if somebody wants to, say, build a accessory dwelling in the back? Because it's going to look like 2 houses on one lot, more so than one with a house in the backyard. So it may not be a huge issue to overcome, but I think it's just one of the points we'll need to discuss with Land Use Advisory Committee. And I welcome anybody that has any great thoughts or insights on this topic to email me. I'm happy to discuss it through and try to get those thoughts into the conversation. So.
Great, thank you. We presently also are not, we don't have any rule in the books that says that we can do Airbnbs, right? So I'm just curious where the county's going to come out with these ADUs and whether those are going to be available for
It's interesting,
Airbnb.
Yeah, and it's been great because Andrea, thank you for, Andrea's been following this topic like a lot of other topics, and she's been feeding me I heard this from this town, or saw this article, so it's very helpful of that. But that's what a lot of the towns are kind of concerned, how they're going to be able to tackle that. And one of the commenters in there even made a point that it's prohibited to have a guest house on your property, but then here you are, saying that you could have a rental unit on your property. What's to keep somebody from, if my parents come and stay for a month, I'm not going to charge them, but it sounds like you could be breaking the law if you do that. So I think that was one of the things that was put up, by one of the other towns, is the county needs to make sure that they're clear on how all this is going to work.
Yeah, okay, I'm glad you're on it, Stephen, thank you. Phil, archives, anything new happening?
No, I mean, the new archivist has been working on the state, trying to get in compliance with the state regulations for our own self-archiving, and has been also working on categorizing things regarding Penn Place and also regarding this building for our future use.
Okay, good.
And as far as traffic, I need to, I know there have been some signs put up. There's some more signs that will be put up, and I need to get the committee back together again to start picking up.
Thank you, and my apologies for not mentioning this, but I have been having a few email exchanges with the county legal division on enforcement of the parking.
Okay.
And I don't know what's really holding it up, except that it's stuck somewhere in the legal process. So I'm probably going to try to shake that tree this coming week with Mark Elrick's office. He's the county executive that we will need to have official delegation from to be able to write a ticket. So, and we had it with Ike Leggett just before that last November election. And then everything went on hold, and they said, hold off on these action memos that were coming out of the county. So it's been almost like going back to square one. But fortunately, we've got some memos and stuff to verify the history. Anyway, hopefully I'll hear more.
There was talk about doing something with the intersection out here. Has that been resolved, or? Like whether to
I saw
make no
some.
parking go back? Oh, was that
I
there?
saw
Okay,
a sign.
good. Yeah,
Sign.
isn't that a song?
Thank you,
Sorry
Andrea.
for that. So,
You can sing it
Thank
if
you,
you
guys.
want.
and somebody else in town did mention to me like 6 times now, so I'm glad I remembered it to bring it up. One thing that bothers some people apparently, I live on that side of town, but over on the other side of town, coming up the hill from Argyle when you hit Kenilworth, I've heard it's a little bit precarious because the house that's the large Victorian that's for sale now, I guess the owners of that, there are a lot of vehicles, they park really close to the corner, so it's tough to see when you're coming around both ways. And on the other side, there's a lot of bamboo, so it's tough to see somebody coming eastbound, north, southbound, depending on how you look at it. So the person that's suggested maybe traffic and parking group, like think about it, is there something that adds some safety to that zone that could be figured out and done before that house like takes sale, so it's not
I
like a
can
surprise?
chime in on the
for
bamboo
that,
side
yeah,
of it,
yeah.
obviously the parking's different, but,
Yeah.
in looking into this, there were a couple homes in town that had bamboo that are on corner lots that are a visual impairment, and our code actually addresses this, and basically there's the curb line is 25, was it 20 or 25 feet? Now I have to look at the code, but it's either 20 or 25 feet, and then if you draw a diagonal, that line shouldn't, that area shouldn't have anything over 3 feet.
Tall,
As-
you mean?
Yeah, over 3 feet tall. As you were referencing earlier, though, some corner lots have kind of different shapes, right? So they're not shaped like this, they might be shaped like this, right? So, you know, they have to be addressed separately, but I'm working with both of the homeowners to try to get that addressed.
At
So,
that one, or?
for that location, and then there's another one on this side of town near the school.
Thanks for doing
Yeah.
that. Yeah, it was the person who brought this up, like, thought was like, try to figure it out while the house is for sale, so the new owner doesn't
Yeah.
have a, idea that there's no regulation around that corner, and then it changes on them overnight, so.
Maybe you could look at that
Yeah,
for the
Yeah, I think
parking
we
area
have,
issues.
but I'll look at
'cause
it
there had been a lot of cars always.
Right.
Trucks too, they're not little cars.
no, not
But that may
anymore.
change, so.
Who knows?
And for the record, I think it was back in 2015 or 17, there's actually, I actually brought forward, a request to see if we could trim that corner with that bamboo. It was in the minutes, came across, so.
I mean, it could go back, kind of what you're saying about like the enforceability of tickets, because I think there's just a blanket rule that you can't park within 25 feet of a corner.
There
I
was-
know when I,
That I don't, sorry, that I don't know, but there is also a rule, that's something about not having, let me try and say this the other way, actually. Making sure that there's 5 feet of clearance so that pedestrians could walk
mhm,
from the street in.
okay,
Now, I think there's a difference there between having like a low hedge that someone could jump into, basically, if a car's coming, right, versus having like a wall of bamboo. But I know that kind of opens up a different can of worms all over town in terms of where that's violated and where it's not, whereas the corner, visibility corner is a more clear,
Yeah.
clear issue, and the county has really clear regulations on that too, and it may be something that, the council may eventually want to look into how the county addresses this,
yeah.
and I have that if anybody wants to
Okay.
see it.
Yeah, and I guess, so appreciate that. So you're looking at like the landscape portion of it, I guess. The other thing is like that vehicle portion, and I'm not sure if it is the same, but when I got my license, we were always told you couldn't park within 25 feet of a corner. I don't know if Maryland's the same as where I got my license, but assume that's everywhere.
Yeah.
But
I thought it was
um,
with stop signs.
but-
but I don't know.
perhaps there's a way we could, let people continue to park there, ticket it, so.
Okay, and, all right, great. And Phil, you'll follow up on that too,
Yeah.
right? Hans, do you have any update on that pedestrian light? How's that doing? Is that,
Well, it's the yin and the yang.
it's the what?
It's the yin and the yang. I keep trying to get a hold of Derek, and I always have to push him to get results. So the good news is they did 2 traffic surveys, including one on the weekend at my insistence when the pool was active.
Yeah,
And they found that the counts warranted additional flashing light. The bad news is, they said, a planning office within SHA has to study it and review that finding and it'll take them 45 days, which means that it's after the swimming season. So the good news is that the flashing light is likely. The bad news is that it's not likely this year. And the good news is that the swimming season is over. And the
Yeah.
additional good news is that SHA now has 8 months to do the job without impacting, and get it done for the next swimming season.
Right.
So that's where we are.
Okay. Is there anything you think we, as a town office or me, can do? Do you,
Well,
I
I
mean, would
can't-
you want me to reach out to, like, District 18, or?
Well, I mean, I walked the stretch with Jeff Wildstreicher, and he sees the problem. He says, "What do you want me to do?" And I said, "I'll get back in touch with you, and I need some heavy metal." And you know, I don't think that there's a whole lot that Jeff can do at this point. He has to let the bureaucracy work a little bit. But if I don't hear back from, and I sent Derek a note end of August, August 26th, saying what's going on, and I haven't heard back from him. And if I keep getting that kind of response, I'll get Jeff a call and say, "Jeff, you need to light a fire under those guys." And he understands it, but Jeff is a neighbor of ours in Kensington, so he is very familiar with that stretch, and so, but we're making progress. It's just frustrating that this is
Okay,
at least a year and a half anniversary of my having to report on that stupid light.
All right, so we're giving them 45 days
Well,
to get back to you.
no, the 45 days is what they say they need to assess whether or not the finding of the traffic surveys was legitimate.
Right.
So if we don't hear by, like, say, the November meeting, should we,
Well, I
the
sent
December,
him a note, saying, "I need to hear from you." So, and he did respond saying, "Well, I'm waiting for the traffic people to get back to me." So that's where we are.
it's not as busy, but there was a fatality at the Tuckerman Lane flashing light over the summer. So,
Which Tuckerman Lane flushing, down the pedestrian crossing?
yeah,
Yeah.
It's so busy over there.
Oh,
Yeah,
and
that's,
people go
that's
fast.
just an awful,
I think it makes it worse that it's probably why they changed Little Falls Road, is like you have 2 lanes, so you can't totally see what the other car's doing. And a lot of times I'll stop for somebody in the car beside me is just flying up.
right.
So I've seen a couple close calls. So at least we only have a 2-lane street. So,
We're really lucky in that regard. Big difference when you have 4 lanes.
yeah.
Okay, so just last few minutes here before we adjourn, if Town Manager Fox would like to update us on what's going on in the office.
Sure. So for my monthly manager's report, in terms of finances, July and August revenues, operations and capital budgets are at expected levels. Total revenues and expenses are within projections. There was one new building permit number for adding a garden shed to the back of 11122 Rokeby Avenue. Town maintenance, it was a very busy couple months for town maintenance. The road repaving project is now complete, and in addition to certain streets getting repaved, there were also some road improvements made to alleviate some of the flooding and stormwater challenges that our residents experience. The gutter and heating system was completed on the Penn Place building. Town maintenance staff replaced downspouts at the nursery school, helped Black Market with some HVAC challenges, and as was mentioned, came to Town Hall. Maintenance staff have met with Montgomery County staff regarding improvements to be made at Garrett Waverly Park in the coming weeks, and some of that's already started. At the town's request, SHA pruned and removed trees and brush along Knowles Avenue, including 3 large trees that were a safety concern. And there were a lot of trees that were pruned or removed, is either part of regular maintenance or as a result of the July 21st storm. And there's a couple claims that we have that are still out there with Legit, our property insurance provider, and with CSX. Actually meeting with CSX on Wednesday about their tree that's damaged. Yeah, their mess. On the town website is now a complete set of property right-of-way maps. There were some files that were previously missing that have been added. However, I would also add, if anybody happens to see any errors with their right-of-way maps, there have been some. We discovered a huge one today since a resident brought it to our attention. So if you see something, please let us know. And that's it.
Okay, good.
Quick question for you. Is it installation of the gutter and heating system or the gutter heating system?
Gutter and heating system.
So there's two different things.
Right, so there was no gutter on the back side of the Penn Place building, and now we've installed the gutter and also the heating system to go along with it so that the large icicles won't form and fall off the edge of the gutter.
And that we already have in,
It was already on the other side of the building, so it was completing the,
Because I thought it was a gutter heating system, so it is a gutter and gutter heating
Yeah.
system.
so,
Okay.
yeah. And there's two different, there's the gutter contractor involved, and then there's an electrician involved as well, so it's.
No, because the way it read was that almost like it was an HVAC system, but what
Oh.
we're really talking about is really a gutter heating system.
Well, it's the there was no gutter also, though.
Right, gutter, you put in new gutter.
Gutter
you
and
put-
gutter heating system.
Yeah.
Yeah, got it, okay. With it.
anybody else have anything before we adjourn? Okay, thank you, Andrea. All right, meeting is adjourned. Have a good night, everybody.